Hello. So why am I making this video? Well, it's not that I wanted to do some kind of big, in-depth conversation or review about Space Jam: A New Legacy. I think that's the title. Space Jam 2, the one that just came out. I didn't have all that much to say about it, but in fact, here's what happened. I was scanning around YouTube the other day, and I saw that a bunch of people were putting up their reviews of the new Space Jam movie, and it dawned on me that I had watched the movie about 3 days prior. I had completely forgotten that I watched the movie at all, and I thought that would make for a somewhat interesting angle to use. I won't call this a review of Space Jam exactly, but just a brief overview of my thoughts on the movie. I'm sorry for the room noise. It's really hot and humid, and I don't have air conditioning, and I'm not going to be under a blanket for 20 minutes while I talk through this stuff. So it is a movie, and it's a movie from Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers' previous attempts at cinematic universes have felt really rough to me. One of the biggest ones, of course, was the Scoob. They just shoehorned in all these other characters, mostly Hanna-Barbera characters that no one really thinks about that much anymore at all. But at the same time, it wasn't really reaching out to all the other Warner Brothers properties, like the big name ones outside of Hanna-Barbera. Well, before that, another notable Warner Brothers movie that sort of did the same thing but in a slightly subtler way was Ready Player One, and that's another one where, we can pull in we have an excuse to pull in all these other characters. Notably, you have Iron Giant, and I forget the other ones because I barely remember the movie. But here again, in Space Jam 2, I'm not even going to say painfully obvious that they're trying to highlight all their other properties, because that's a huge part of the movie. It couldn't be more surface level. The Warner verse, it's the server verse, but it's somehow Warner branded server verse. This is where all the Warner media umbrella IPs exist as their own independent planets, I guess, and the planets are sort of aware of each other. So that's what a lot of people are going to talk about with this movie. Yeah, it feels very corporate, it feels very stiff and forced and awkward, and obviously the story is nothing. LeBron James, there's no acting happening. He's kind of a notorious sellout, so of course he was going to do this movie. The number of times they just have to use the specific phrase, either written or spoken, NBA superstar, felt way over the top to me. I was imagining his PR team writing up this, drawing up the contract with Warner's, and they have to say the specific phrase at least 5 times, because this is going to cement his legacy, of course, not his career or the other stuff he's done off the court. That's a little, This movie, Space Jam 2, it's going to be the one. It'll put him on the same level as Michael Jordan. Yeah, the movie's bad. That's really obvious. It's not insightful to talk about. And there's definitely been a trend in online media criticism, even bad online media criticism, where there's a punching bag, an obvious punching bag will roll along every once in a while, and everybody can just gang pile on top of this movie that everyone can just kind of agree on as being bad. Way back in the day, it was kind of the Twilight movies for a while. The Emoji Movie was a really a notable other example. Cats, of course, got a lot of that kind of attention. I mean, it's not exclusive to online media criticism. That's kind of a subgenre of written media criticism as well, where it's fun to read the review that's just extremely critical of the movie and says that it's trash and it's not even worth looking at. Ebert did plenty of that stuff. Lots of other critics have done that in the past. But with regards to this specific brand of dead horse beating in terms of contemporary wide release movies, I don't really want to do that with Space Jam, because sure, if someone gets really worked up about the Space Jam sequel and they're like, it's so bad and it's insulting to our tastes and all that other stuff, and yeah, it is very bad. It gives you a sense of what Warner Brothers thinks about the general audiences in the US and what they expect and what they'll put up with. Apparently it made a decent amount of money at the physical box office for, in-person screenings. It's also streaming on HBO Max. The big thing here is that it's gotten to the point where there have been so many of these kinds of movies that are just extremely thinly veiled cash grabs with no real ideas. They feel slapped together. Even if there was actually a lot of work put into them, they just feel thin and awful and kind of gross, especially when you're aware of that other level happening here. It feels so much like those other kinds of movies that everybody loves to hate on so much that I just don't care. It did not impact me in really any significant way, positively or negatively. I will say that by the time the movie was over, I was in a worse mood than I was when the movie started. I felt that it was very, very long. I was constantly checking to see how much time was left on the movie. But overall, nothing. Again, like I said, the whole premise for this video is that I completely forgot about seeing the movie at all 2 or 3 days after seeing it. There was barely anything left in my brain that this movie had left behind. But on the other side too, no, I'm not gonna make a 3.5 hour super intricate and nitpicky look at why it's so bad and how cynical it is. And here are the converging entertainment industry forces that led to its I don't want to say its creation, but its coagulation within the entertainment industry. Like it feels like something that just kind of oozed up from the earth as evidence of a dark part of our past. But honestly, it's I don't think it's worth that. And I get that, like, I understand that style of online criticism and discussion tends to get a lot of views. You have people whose whole brand is, I get really angry about movies that I think are bad. I don't feel that about this movie. I rarely feel that about any movie, honestly. There is a small sense of frustration with executives and LeBron James and other people involved of letting this happen at all. But for the vast majority of people involved on the project, it was just a job, most likely. They were just doing their job. And no, that's not an excuse to do a bad thing. We've talked about the banality of evil before and all that kind of stuff. But I just don't care. I don't feel like talking about it very much at all, and I would even argue that one of the best things we can do in response to terrible Hollywood movies is not to promote them anymore. We don't need to encourage people to watch it for the memes. We don't need to encourage people to get really angry at a studio that's made up of people they've never met in their life. It's a corporate product and it's a bad one. How about we just move on, I guess? I mean, unless you think that like your ultra negative and specific criticism of the movie is somehow going to translate to a large scale change in the mainstream entertainment industry, but I'm sorry, I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think so. So with all that said, it's not much of anything. The only thing about it that's sort of funny bad is the mass amounts of extras they have around the big basketball game who were probably not, on the same set as LeBron James and the other sort of leads who are live action on the court. And they're just like sort of kind of dressed up, to correspond to, oh, these people are from Game of Thrones or Clockwork Orange or these other properties. And it feels so cheap and awful, but they had to have known that it looked that bad. And I imagine just the insane day that the costuming department had. It must have been wild. But it's just so funny how the extras they look like people at a Halloween costume party. It's pretty embarrassing. But outside of that, no, it's not funny bad. It's not interesting. It's not really even something new. It's not a new kind of corporate bad. It's just a bad movie, and that's it. I'm sorry. There's not too much else to say. But that's about it for me. Feel free to share your feelings in the comments, of course, and all the YouTube stuff. And thanks for stopping by.